of buying a computer, what I would suggest is a good mid-range, not low-end, not high-end computer. Basically, as I understand, Sam is to be able to do presentation and do basic word processing, and maybe in some cases tables or have Excel capabilities and all that. In my experience, although it's limited to working with HP computers and Dell or HP laptops and Dell laptops, as a non-technical type person, usually computers have a lot more capabilities than I had skills. Unless we're going to do something sophisticated now, we've got at the house right now, I've got a little Asus minuscule laptop, and no reflection on Asus. My nephews swear by them, but this thing has just been a pain in the neck for me. Maybe it's Windows 8, I guess that probably is. I'm not using it. It's Google Chrome and all these other things. They're kind of a steep learning curve for me, but my suggestion would be a mid-range. Now, when I worked in private industry, they typically gave lower-ranking employees like myself Dells or HPs. These were usually mid-range or in some cases refurbished, and they seem to work very, very well. These computers got extensive use doing, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations. We used them to travel overseas. They got rough use, so that's my comfort zone is Dells and HPs. Interest of full disclosure, I'm a former HP employee, but that's what they gave us, and they seem to work okay.
What do you think, Bruce? You had some comments about some other brands too.
Yeah, my experience with Dells has been that they've pushed a lot on the corporate area. They've made a lot of inroads in that area, but my experience with them hardware-wise has been very poor. And that they, in order to get that corporate, they often put, whatever is the cheapest components they can stick in them, which means it's hit or miss on reliability. I've got friends that just refuse to buy Dells because they had so many crap out on them. HP I've had good luck with. This one happens to be an Asus, and I got it because the price was right. I've been in town looking. I can find some mid-range HPs at good prices. All the Asus I found in town right now are high-end. So,
well, another advantage of a laptop versus a tablet is obviously the internal CD, DVD drive. If you have a tablet, like I had a Toshiba tablet, I had to go out and purchase an external DVD, CD drive, and it has to be hooked up through a USB port.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the tablets for this type of use for what we're doing. I don't think.
But if you have to install any software that might be purchased, it certainly is easier with an internal.
Yeah, in fact, that's what I've been looking at. Is strictly, it does.
Yeah.
I've been looking at a mid-range HP. If you go over 15-inch to a 17-inch, they start getting heavy, bulky, pain in the butt that way. If you go under 15-inch, you usually start giving up things like the internal drive. They start dropping stuff off. And the keyboards on the under 15-inch are getting really bad, although you can add an external keyboard. So I've been looking at the mid-range HPs in order to hold the price down for us. Most of the mid-range seem to have 6 gigabyte of memory. And what I need to find out, because they all come with Windows 8 now, is if 6 gigabyte is enough to run Windows 8 and run Windows Office well. That could be the kicker, because I think Windows 7 wanted, I think, 2 gigabytes of memory minimum. Windows 8, I think, requires 4. Well, that doesn't leave you anything for the application. So you need to look at the application as well, so that you don't have to worry as much about crashes and things.
Now, I've got one question here for you. Have you been checking on government pricing to see if the places offer government prices?
Have not checked into anything about government.
Because this town can get government pricing.
GSO schedule, or GSA schedule?
What's that?
The general services?
Yes. Because at the, when working through the city, you can buy the tires that you use on the trucks and all that at government pricing.
But through where? That's what, do you have any idea? Through
Any-
where?
I can buy tires through any tire shop, so I'm surprised.
I'll check into it because
Staples.
I looked at Staples already,
Yeah,
and their price for almost the exact same computer over Sam's Club was like a couple of $100 more.
yes, but check with Staples to see if they offer government pricing.
Right, I will. I have looked, and in particular, when I've been looking at projectors,
Yeah,
that would be, I hope, brighter and clearer, although, hey, this one looks better tonight. Staples, I thought, had a better price for what, at this point, I've got to look more into the specs, but it looked like a better unit at a better price.
yes, but as I say, there's a lot of places like that will offer government pricing.
Yeah, I have not checked into that yet.
Because-
I was still, at this point,
Yeah.
investigating models rather than investigating final price.
Well, you know, just, you can ask them to see if they do when you're investigating this.
I will. I've been tight on time, so I've
Well,
only been into
I
3 places so
understand.
But I have located 3 models of projectors that look like they do what we want. Online, I didn't have much luck looking at projectors. Everything that had good specs was way high. But actually, when I went into the stores, I found 3 models I got to look at much deeper. But your real problem with projectors is always brightness versus having to turn the room lights down versus size of the picture you get. They're getting better, however.
Like everything else, improved.
Yeah. But right now, I'm looking at a projector price of around $400 before looking into your discounts or anything.
Yeah,
That doesn't sound
And-
unreasonable.
No, when I looked online, finding something that had decent brightness specs, it was like, wait a minute, I'm hitting $1,000. What's going on here?
Is there kind of this corporate standard that kind of everything is measured against on those things?
Not that I can find.
not on a projector now.
As I,
I've been looking for specs and trying to eliminate those specs that drive the price up. For instance, the 2 units with almost the same specs, if you want wireless connectivity, that adds like $300 on right there. It's like, wait a minute, we don't need wireless, not for what we're doing.
Well, no, we do need wireless. This is what this is.
No, you
No.
have to hook a cable up.
No, the projector.
Oh, the projector, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
computer,
sorry.
you'll have wireless and anything.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, built in.
Yeah, no, we don't need to have it on the projector.
Yeah, you start getting into some of that, and all of a sudden the price goes, whoa, what happened here?
well, the presumption being we're gonna be using it for town meetings or groups and all that, so here's the scenario. A lot of us are not as young as we used to be, and our eyesight isn't as good, and clarity is, especially if the room's crowded, your ability to maneuver where you can see maybe. So my recommendation would be to go with whatever gives the best, within our budget limitations.
Right, and that's
the
what,
best,
that's what I'll be looking at next. I just haven't had time to go beyond, the initial. Now I'm gonna look at actual specs and at customer reviews, and I have not had time to do that yet. By next week, I hope to give you something on that.
Just out of curiosity, who are the major manufacturers of
Oh boy, Epson, NEP, there's a
their slogan?
there's a slug of them out there if you start looking online. What's available in town appears to be, a lot of them are Epsons on the projectors.
Really?
Yeah. At least in the price ranges that were. Which surprised me, because I hate Epson printers.
Well,
If you want to spend a mint on ink, buy an Epson printer.
this thing isn't cooperating at all. It's not letting me connect, speaking of wireless.
Shoot, there is a new,
I know, I have the new password.
okay, you do have it now.
And it's still not connecting for some reason. That's all right. Maybe we don't need it tonight. I wanted to bring that website up on the screen tonight so we could look through the definitions and stuff when we were doing it. Maybe I can get yours to do it, but later
I
on.
copied it off.
Oh, you do have it? Oh, that's cool. So maybe we'll be all set. So let's put that on standby. We're gonna let Paula go first and then second anyway. I was just trying to get us to the connection, but. So tonight, Paula, were you gonna do 1 or 2 presentations? Were you going to do 1 or 2 presentations? Because you emailed me and you told me you were going to talk about ethics, and you emailed those 2 things, or the 2 or 3 page document about ethics. But then you also told me, either in an email or something, that you wanted to talk to us about what we were proposing to change in 1, 2, and 3.
I was proposing that the ethics section that I drafted up was going to be in Article 2. So you can look at it as 2 separate things or all in one thing.
Okay, well, did you want to talk about, because you emailed me and told me you wanted to talk about what Bruce talked about last week, or what we all talked about. We talked about making changes to Articles 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Right.
Right, and you emailed me and you told me you had some comments about that.
Very brief ones, yes.
Okay.
Just very brief.
Okay, well, which do you want to start with? Your comments about 1, 2, and 3, or your ethics discussion?
It's going to take longer to talk about it than to do it. I mean, I don't know. Like I say, I had lined out that I'd quickly go through 1, 2, and 3, and then offer you the ethics as an addition to Article 2.
Go ahead and talk about it then. Stand up.
Okay, you ready? All right. My brain is pretty dull today, so it won't take much to get me confused. I think there's, I might, if I didn't copy it,
We have,
copyright. You have some?
no, are those the ethics?
This is what I started with the Eddington. Okay, you guys all got one of those?
Yeah.
Looks like that?
Yeah, right
And
here.
you guys got all of the,
Yeah,
the-
the 3 pages.
the 3 pages?
3 pages.
All right, the audience is lucky tonight. Anybody want a copy?
Paul.
Thank you.
Those are all the same and those are all the same.
What was this about?
That was just 1 page.
Yeah. Is this going to fall within the 15-minute
She
presentation?
has
I
like 10
hope
minutes, and then 5 minutes of Q&A. So go ahead
I
and
hope
fire.
so. I hope so. I wanted to remind you that if you're not making use of MMA legal, that's who I found very, very helpful when we were doing the ordinance, and keep them to run things by. I sent you a list of some reference materials that I used to come up with what I have tonight. And so I didn't make copies for you, but I sent that list to the office if people want to reference any of that material. All right, Article 1. You said changing respect to deleting to enjoy their property without undue disturbances from abutting or neighboring uses. Change that to respecting. I think the original language was good. You wanted to put in the comment about the Agenda 21. No matter how much I agree with what Agenda 21 says, I would encourage you to instead maybe do a resolution for the town meeting warrant, asking the town to endorse that sentiment rather than putting it into the ordinance. I'm not sure that I don't know if anybody's going to feel like arguing over Agenda 21 being in the ordinance, but I'm just suggesting it might not be the best place for it. Also, I was going to remind you that the DEP will want you with the shoreline management stuff. They didn't just look at that one article, they want the whole, or at least the person that was handling it that time, she wanted the whole, ordinance to look through to make sure we hadn't done anything that would, be in conflict with the shoreline management. And the floodplain management, I forget, I think that was out of the state planning office at that time. And they also want to look at everything, so make sure you're up to date and not conflicting in any other way within your ordinance. Alright. Sorry for that sidetrack, I made a note on the first page and forgot it. Alright, now the changes you were gonna make to the amendments to the ordinance and maps in section 1.7. If you would look at that original language comes from state statute on petition for article and warrant. It's Title 30A, Chapter 121, Section 2522, petition for article and warrant. So I encourage you to put that through the MMA lawyer. Used to be Richard Llewellyn was the one that I found most helpful. I'd encourage you to put that through him because you may not want to leave out that language that is lifted right from state statute and put into our ordinance. If you change that, I'm not sure that that's the best way to go about that.
You're talking about this 1.7.2? All we did is change may to shall.
The 1.7.
Oh, that's right, and then you sent me the other updates, which I can't get to right now.
1.7.4. The copy that we got in the town office didn't have that change made to it.
Right, well, the one on the web, which I can't get to right now because this thing won't connect with the password that she gave me, is the what we had talked about last week.
Right, and you were going to leave out in section A, or whatever that comes out to be in 1.7.1 probably, initiation. The municipal officers shall insert the proposed amendment article into the next warrant issued, or shall within 60 days call a special town meeting for its consideration. And if I looked right on the one that you have on the internet, on the website, that you're going to leave that sentence out, and that comes directly from the state statute. So I'd encourage you to check that out with MMA Legal before you get committed to taking that out of the air. On Article 2, you move some, the following the approval of the planning board, and that moved that language around and was not doing anything too much. Under powers and duties, section 2.1.2.2.3. I'd also encourage you about the planning board being the local authority for the interpretation of the ordinance, including the final determination. I've done that by MMA Legal too. It makes me wonder, what do you do with the Board of Appeals if you guys have more interpretation authority than the Board of Appeals? Seems to me that that might be but maybe I'm not seeing the bigger picture here. And those changes to adding the contractor into those other sections, that's up to you guys what's legal and what isn't. It just seems to me it would be kind of intimidating, but maybe that's standard language. You guys would know more than I do about that, but kind of intimidating to getting people to come and contractors to come and work in the town if they were subject to being in violation as though they were the applicant or the developer. I don't know, maybe that's standard. I'd leave.
Well, the issue is that we've had actual instances of the contractors saying, the landowner told me so, and the landowner saying, I didn't tell you so. And so this way, everybody knows that they're all gonna be responsible, and so.
Yeah, I don't know, how it seems, but that's, I don't know.
Because the contractor is supposed to know the laws of the town that he's working into.
Yeah,
And they gotta abide by the laws,
yeah,
just like the homeowner
yeah.
does.
So if it brings the ordinance more into conformity with what they do in other places and what you need, then that's great. So I'll skip over the ethics ones and just go very quickly into Article 3. It just seems to me that when you take out to ensure that and call it so, and I think there was another place in Article 3 that you, it seemed like, oh yeah, the commitment, statement of commitment to sustainable use of natural resources and open space, that you leave out the sentence. It seems like without that sentence there, why call it a commitment? You're not committing to anything. You should say we have natural resources,
So,
you know?
what is the numbers on that?
I
313.
would be, I'm trying to use your new system here, it's 3.1.3.
Right.
Is that, yeah. The commitment on the first page of Article 3, the commitment to sustainable use of natural resources and open space. I mean, what, I'm not.
You're talking about the last sentence.
Yeah, take off the last sentence.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can't find
without it, you're just saying, we have nice natural resources. That, to me, and that we're rich with ponds and stuff, but there's no statement of commitment in that. Without, if you take that sentence out, to me.
Just one of the things I did, Paula, during the week, I went and I looked through Holden and Eddington, and they don't have any words like this at all. They have nothing like this. It starts off, it just says, you know, ordinance for, you know, gravel pits or whatever, and jump right into it. There is none of this. This is just, so my question is, being and reviewing predominant documents around other communities, this type of language is typically in the comprehensive plan and not in the ordinance, because this isn't like binding type language. So I'm wondering, you know, after we did all this or whatever, and I looked through it, instead of, I mean, in the back of my mind, I started to think, what I should have done is just come and said, no, we shouldn't have any of this stuff in here because nobody else has it. So why do we do it in the first place? I'm just asking.
I was going to ask, I asked Kathy and she didn't know. I filled those filing cabinets in there under the counter, the map counter, with our research and our drafts and stuff. I don't know if it's still there, but I thought Dave might find it amusing. Not necessarily interesting, but amusing to go through all that. You know, you have to know what the process was to see how come that's that way. I don't know. We started with Holden's ordinance. That was what we took as the model from the get-go. And I don't remember what was in that and what wasn't.
Well, Holden has like, I forget what the count is, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking something close to 30 different ordinances.
Well, we just used one of them.
Well, they have a zoning ordinance, but even in the zoning ordinance, it just starts off and says the town's broken into zones. Then it starts telling you there's different zones that the town has, and that's it. I mean, that's the zoning part. Then they have one for like subdivisions and et cetera. And I was gonna bring them up, and I'm just having a tough time because I really wanted to bring that up tonight, was my goal.
It's probably up there in the drawer.
Right, but I'm just saying,
But
we
it's starting.
didn't ever, out in the drawer isn't gonna be a reason why we did it. In the back of my mind, trying to get things cleaned up.
I mean, I have, that was in 2005, you know, and I don't remember, that's ancient history.
Well, right, well, that's why I'm saying, because maybe we don't, maybe we shouldn't even have any of that stuff.
When you change from a goal to implement the comprehensive plan to promote the comprehensive plan, that change in language, you have to remember when we first wrote that, we were writing that with money that was designated for implementation of the comprehensive plan. This ordinance, the whole thing, is implementation of the comprehensive plan. I mean, if you want to divorce it from that.
Well, no, I don't think, I mean, I'm not
You
saying
can
that we
do
should,
that.
but I'm just saying that if the comprehensive plan said, you know, you have to do these 5 things, and one of the 5 things is write an ordinance, I don't know how many things, but just, you
Yeah.
know.
That's,
And one of the 5 things was write a land use ordinance. You know, it doesn't mean in the land use ordinance that you have to write, you know, stuff that should be in the comprehensive plan. I'm not saying that this language, I'm not saying that the language doesn't fit someplace in the community. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, for this document, I'm not confident, you know, because I was just accepting it before, okay, and I didn't look into this language before. And now that I looked around a little bit in this current version, because, you know, we've been told that the Eddington ordinance and the Holden ordinance are good ordinances, so I went and looked, and they don't have any of this stuff in them.
well, we started out under a little bit at a disadvantage because you guys weren't involved with the comprehensive plan, okay? And Fred and I were. And Fred and I had this vision of the land use ordinance when we started out. And we didn't know any more about land use ordinances than you did. So it's you know, it wasn't like we set out to have this exact thing in mind.
Well, I know, so that's why, and I'm wondering, you know, because if this stuff is gonna become problematic, you know, maybe we should just delete it all and make sure it's in the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Well, I like to think about that the comprehensive plan had a theme. And
Yeah,
that
that's a
theme
reasonable assumption.
you know, and that theme got carried into the ordinance. And that theme is expressed in Articles 3 and 4. And it was expressed in that other transitional language that we had at one time.
Paula, the question is it really even appropriate as
Well,
part
that
of this?
depends on what you want to do, okay? There were times in 2007, or it might have even been the next year when I finally found out in 2008 that in 2007, new shoreline zoning mandate had come out, and so we already were out of date before we even finished writing the thing. And I begged you guys to just adopt the new shoreline zoning and the new floodplain management, and the heck with the rest of it. At that point, I was ill, I didn't care, you know. There were a lot of decisions along the way that make it what it is today. Now, if you are doing a land use ordinance with some kind of growth management strategy, it seems to make sense to me that you'd put it in the ordinance. Otherwise, what sense was there to come up with that strategy? And it kind of organized your thinking around how do we put zoning into the town of Clifton? And I think that's what this ordinance does. It carries on that theme from the comprehensive plan that said, we don't envision we're going to be a hub of commercial activity. We think we have a lot of natural resources in town. If anything happens, it's going to be developing those natural resources along the lines of campgrounds, other tourist types of things that we're right on Route 9, that maybe we can capitalize on some of that, what we have. So that was kind of the theme, and Fred can correct me if I'm misstating it. that was kind of the theme that we had in mind when we started on this land use ordinance. At the end of the comprehensive plan, when we sent it off to the state, the way that our consultant had written it up with a village out by Chick Hill, thank goodness they had a change down there. They sent it back to us and said, no, you should have this village out by Chick Hill. And we went, oh, I don't think so. Yeah. So our consultant then, she left, and we rewrote it to more closely resemble what our town really is. And for better or worse, we got an implementation grant to write this ordinance in according to the guidelines that were coming out of the state planning office, which, you know, I can disagree with a bunch of them too.
Well, did you, on the things that we're talking about in section 3, so we can go ahead and talk about the ethics, did you write down what you had thought we should do for sections 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, I think I pretty much, you know, I just feel like,
Well, if you just email it to me, that'll be good.
that you're worrying too much about a few words in a goal type, and Fred will remember, Ruth Perry used to scream at me, because I said, you know, are you sure we really want to be saying this? And it's only a plan. It's only a plan. Well,
Right,
now this isn't only a plan, this is a regulation.
Right,
So-
right, I know, and so, I mean, again, you know, one of the reasons, like last week, just kind of back up a little bit before we talk about the ethics, Bruce wanted to bring in this idea of having these participating parcels and non-participating parcels, and, you know, and globalize that for, like,
Right.
all the different types of development. And to me, like, if we hadn't developed the wind ordinance, we would never have even used those words in the first place. So then he said, brought up the idea of, well, we'll just give them like a waiver. And we already know what happens about with waivers. They're difficult, and it's just, to me, it's not really worth the effort, you know, in some cases. So if you're going to have stuff in there, it should be in there. So what if this is, like you said, this is an ordinance, okay, as opposed to a plan, which is where I would agree with what you and Ruth just said about that this stuff being important elements of a plan. Okay, when it comes into an ordinance, you know, I'm just trying to avoid having to have the town and other people go through in the future some stuff in here, you know, that isn't really like isn't like an enforceable thing. An enforceable thing is Route 9 is the boundary for Zone 5, okay? Because everybody knows where Route 9 is, everybody knows what you can do in Zone 5, and on the other side of Route 9 you can be in Zone 4. Okay, so that's a crystal clear thing, it's enforceable. But to say that, you know what, it's just like, even in the bigger scheme around the globe, they say one man's patriot is another man's terrorist, okay? I mean, I kind of love that phrase, because it does put in perspective a lot of different ways people think. But I mean, who is to say, you know, which natural resources are important natural resources and which ones, what's damaging a natural resource? I mean, there's a big, even with the climbing community right now, you know, as much as we like the climbing community, people climb, they put these, I don't know what all this stuff's called because I'm not a climber, I just like hike and stuff, but those little pins they basically put in the cliff faces, all right? Well, apparently there's a big discussion on national park lands or whether or not climbers should be able to put pins in these rocks to do it. So in the back of your mind, the first thing that comes to mind when you think climber, you think, oh, these cool outdoor naturalist type people or whatever, and they're into this with the National Park Service on putting pins in the rocks. So even though they participate in what the average person, if you ask them on a Saturday afternoon in Bangor, would think is a natural thing, that's not considered a good thing anymore, apparently. That's the kind of thing I think we would like to avoid in an ordinance.
And that's why sometimes when John Williams says, I think we ought to
Throw the whole thing
repeal the
out.
whole thing, okay, go back to the separate little ones, and you know they're easier to handle. They're,
I mean, in some ways, I
you
know.
know, I don't want to be the person to defend the way we have it because it grew. I mean, it grew of its own, and I don't know if you can. You could call it a code, and just keep the code parts and not have a strategy or anything like that.
Well, I do think it's important to have a strategy, so I just want to be sure you do understand that. I'm just not confident that this is the place to write your strategy.
And I don't think, I could be wrong, because I don't keep up on this stuff anymore, but I think the courts still, and the state, they still want your land use ordinance to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And if you don't say anything in your ordinance about the comprehensive plan, if you don't try to tie it in, you're probably going to be safe 99 times. And then there's that one time that somebody challenges you that what you've done isn't consistent with your plan.
Right.
And that's why the time is fleeting, people. It's time to redo that plan. And I encourage you to have somebody else do it. I encourage you.
Right. So go ahead and talk to us about that. Go ahead.
I might suggest, we've already used up more than that.
Well, that's okay.
15 minutes, I would suggest that we take this ethics issue and put it to February 24th, which is a free day.
Yeah.
Because this could get into some long discussion.
Well, I just would rather have her just, I rather, she said she was gonna do it, I told her she could do it, it's my fault that we went a little longer on this. If you could just talk why you think it's important to have an ethics thing, you know, we've got some quick comments here, I'd like to just kind of get this concept rolled through.
Alright, so what I did was, I happened to look first at the Eddington Link Energy Facility ordinance, and it had an ethics section, so I pulled that out, and then I fooled with it. You guys know I can do that quite at will. And I also used some other, the information I talked about at the selectmen's meeting, and some other sources. And I encourage you to look at I sent to the office, there are 3 main townsman articles that I referred to. Some of them might, one of them might be in your planning board manual. I found them online, but they talk about due process, ex-parte communications, bias, those kind of things. And so that's what I had been reading and looking at, and so I put it together, kind of using Eddington's format. We had, in 2005, I had proposed to the selectmen an ethics policy for the selectmen to adopt, and I drew some from that. I don't have that. I don't know where I got it, and I don't have that in a form that I can send you, or
We have it right here.
Some sections of that aren't directly comparable, so what I'm thinking is that if it doesn't go in the ordinance, if you don't want anything in the ordinance about ethics, that the town should have an ethics ordinance that applies in general.
Well, that's basically really what I was wanting to hear from you, because this is the town ethics ordinance, and it's not finalized.
Oh, the draft that we had in 2005?
It says, yeah, it does say 05. I should just get my glasses on.
Yeah,
I
it
get it
never
far enough away
got-
from my face.
It never got signed.
Right, well, what I would think
Never
is,
got
just
lined
like right now, what they're working on is this like meeting practices when they have a regular meeting to try, they're working on a procedure for that. And I think the planning board agrees. Initially, we were just gonna do our thing and they were gonna do their thing. But I think after, the past couple months, we've thought about it and they're working on a procedure. I think whatever they come up with, as soon as they finalize what they're doing for their meeting process, we're gonna adopt the exact same meeting process. So with regard to ethics, I think the same thing.
What the select board.
It should be, an ethics ordinance should be something that is uniform for all the boards and all the employees in the community.
Yeah, and I just think that I kind of liked it as being part of the ordinance, so that it reminds people.
Paula, don't you realize that 90% of this is covered by the state law already?
Right, and that's what, if you're not aware of state law, then, it's easier to see it in your ordinance than to go research.
Well,
state
then
law.
if the state law changes and things are modified, then you don't match.
Yeah, well, the thing that changes probably more often than the state law is how the courts interpret that state law. So you do need to keep up on it, that's for sure.
Right, well, I'm not one, like, you may as well just print out like every MRSA in the state and put it in the ordinance going by your philosophy. Like, why would you pick ethics and not pick the subdivision?
Why would we pick ethics?
And not subdivision?
Because there hasn't been a lot of controversy over subdivisions in this town since, I don't know when, but
Okay,
there's been a
well-
lot of controversy over ethics.
Well, hang on. I like to have like a bona fide need. So, can you give me like instances of, because you're targeting the planning board now for why the land use ordinance, which is only the planning board. Okay, so can you, what are instances that you can think of that the planning board did things that were unethical according to this thing?
I think it's in one of the main townsman articles. It talks about that the appearance,
Okay, what did this planning board do that would be unethical? What did this planning board do? Because we're talking about this ordinance, we're not talking about the towns that the main townsman talks about. We're talking about this town, this ordinance.
what would be, I mean, I guess I'm wondering why anyone would be against ethics?
We're not.
Well, you
Against
started your
ethics.
presentation by talking about that Eddington created an ethics
That
that came out of their wind ordinance. Does it only apply to their wind ordinance?
Well, that's why I changed the language.
But, I mean, why
I
would
don't
they
know
want
why-
something that they
They
create an
based-
ordinance?
It appears to me that they based their ordinance on what we were working on at the same time, and yet they added the ethics. I didn't ask them where they got the ethics section, I just came across.
We are supporting, which I didn't realize that this thing hadn't been finalized. I do think, I mean, I'm speaking for myself right now, I think I'm speaking for the board. You know, if, for the community to have an ethics policy, for the select board, if they want to take it on, to build an ethics policy, just like they're building their meeting policy, you know, that is not just a mimicking of the state law, but, you know, to fill in the gaps, because as we all know, there might be some gaps in the state law that the town might want to cover. We're definitely supporting that, and if the select board, I think, would say to the planning board, would you look over the ethics policy for the state, and would you look over, you know, our ethics policy and come up with some ideas for what you think we could do to fill in the gaps? We definitely would fill in the gaps and give it to the select board, and let the select board put it through a process, you know, so that it covered everybody. I think we would
There's one
support
problem
that.
that I have with that. First of all, why it came up in 2005 was because of incompatibility of offices. Was the instigation for us trying to get, because
What does that mean?
it meant that there was a planning board member who was also a selectman. And so that, you know, I'm not saying that that person ever did anything unethical, illegal, but the appearance is of conflict of interest is there, or the appearance, you have to have, how can somebody be in a position to appoint that's in the position of appointing that office that they're also holding?
Right, well, we would probably agree with that. So if that's not covered directly in the state ethics code, that would be something that we would like address, that in the town of Clifton, that would be something that would cover everybody.
Okay.
Well, I do have a couple of specific questions. You have one here, business affiliation, having a direct or indirect business affiliation with the applicant, et cetera, et cetera. Define, especially indirect.
I don't think that their ordinance defined that. I'm throwing this up to you guys.
Right, well, see, when you start saying something like that, what is an indirect business affiliation?
That's why I'm only throwing this out to you guys for your consideration.
Okay, because I have no
They
idea what
actually-
that would be.
How many times removed? Third or fourth removed? Your cousin's cousin?
Well, no, that's a business
Well-
affiliation we're talking about. So in other words, if one of us stops at the Clifton Variety and buys things there and gets our gas there, is that an indirect business affiliation?
I believe it's either in state statute or it's in a precedent, law court precedent, that they have language there that tells you what that means.
Yeah, well, I didn't find it in a quick search. Another
You know,
one,
that's why I would.
personal relationship. Define personal relationship,
It's
please.
in the one that Eric just held up.
So if Bruce came to the board with an application to build a new roof on his garage, would we all have to recuse ourselves because we have a personal relationship with Bruce and then he couldn't get his permit
Well,
at
I
all?
don't think it meets any of the criteria that are in that,
See, here's the problem I have with this personal relationship one, and I understand what the state law says.
I didn't
Okay,
think that
but
one
here it
is.
is. We'll take the example of Wayne Haskell. He's my nephew, so I'm only, I think, twice removed according to their chart. It's either, I'm either two, it's either number 2 or number 3. But when you say personal relationship, he's never been in my house in his entire life. I have never been in his house in his entire life. We don't see each other, we don't converse, we're just, but he happens to be my nephew. That would make it, I would have to recuse myself, and I agree, because we're still related. But, based on that relationship thing, if my best friend came before this board, because I'm not in the butter, and I'm not related to him, unless I revealed it, you know, at what point, I really hate this personal relationship, it's very broad.
I think the more, you know, if everybody's working on the same goal,